Thank you, Joseph. Actually, I was thinking about this whole thing about civil disobedience before, and my big idea was that when they ask you what brand of Islam do you follow, that as an ode to the EDL, we should say the Muslimic one. It might work, you never know. So this session, final session, we want to open up to questions and answers. Do we have some roving mics? Could you actually leave one for our speakers, please? Yeah, thank you.
Can I ask the panel what the Muslim community in this country can do to repeal this law, which is criminal actually against the Muslims? And I think black people are also being stalked and searched. And they are complaining more vigorously than the Muslim community is doing. So I think we ought to do something collectively to attempt to repeal the law actually rather than challenging it face on. And politicians in this country are very stupid. The politicians are saying that Muslim people are radicalized. I'm radicalized, I'm over 65, okay? They are saying that the young people are being radicalized. But this kind of law is radicalizing the Muslim community of all ages and all faiths, and whether they go to mosque or they do not go to mosque. As a Muslim, I'm actually very upset about what will happen to my children if Islamophobic ideas are propagated through Evening Standard, Daily Telegraph, Financial Times, all the media. I do not read this shit anymore. Thank you.
Let's take another question, and maybe we can answer them as a group. Yes, please. Sorry, just here.
Hi. I have a few points to raise, if I can have 2 minutes of your time. First of all, when it comes to forms, where they ask you what race are you, for example, they neglect a lot of people. I myself, I'm not Asian, I'm not black, nor am I Arab. I'm in the middle somewhere, and I am North African. However, there is not a place in a form for somebody who is North African/Arab. So therefore, when it comes to a form, when they are stopped and searched, when they are held at airports, when they are detained, they have to tick other. Therefore, their representation is not fairly proportioned along with the other people as well, who are Asian and black. Another thing I would like to say is last year, September 11, there was a rally by the EDL. I had no idea this was going to take place. I was just in central London in Hyde Park. It was a Sunday. On Sundays in Hyde Park, something called Speaker's Corner takes place. So I went to go and listen. I was there with some friends, and we was approached by the EDL. They wanted to fight us because we was wearing exactly what I'm wearing today. We didn't have it. We wasn't fighting, but we wasn't accepting their torment. And the police came. So we thought, oh good, the police are going to be here to help us. What did the police do? They sectioned us off, and they pulled out a camera and took pictures of all of us, and not the EDL. So again, we need to challenge what the police are doing to the Muslims, and to the Muslim youth. And in terms of what the people are saying today, is that yes, the government themselves are causing radicalization to the Muslim youth, because the Muslim youth, they do not have a voice. If we look at the people like Abu Nusayba, who was arrested recently, people like Abu Muwahid, who was arrested today, but just for having a voice and speaking out against the corruption of the state, we are arrested, we are detained, or we are, given terrorism offences. But that is not the case. We're just having a voice, and that's what I wanted to say. Thank you for your time.
Can we just take one? I'd like to take one more, and then we'll. Yeah, just over here.
I just wanted to just find out, under the Schedule 7 law, do you have to be truthful in your answers? Because obviously, if it's a requirement to give an answer, do you still have to be truthful in giving those answers?
Okay, sorry. If we can get to, so the first question was, how can we repeal the legislation? Moazzam, do you want to?
in relation to, you asked what can the Muslim community do, particularly in getting this legislation repealed or changed. The problem that happens now with the Muslim community, it is so self-censored that is hard to describe. It's very difficult now to find a mosque or a Muslim community center where you can discuss political issues, of which this is one of them. Because clearly this law has been passed and has been applied as a result of political action, as Saleh was talking about. And now the mosques are not at all a place where you can discuss anything to do in relation to politics, in relation to the laws that are taking place. We've often tried to approach some of the mosques and the leaders and so forth, while they felt they've been affected by those issues and they know it's a community issue. They don't want to talk about it on a platform where the idea of terrorism and the accusations of terrorism and anything that's associated with it become associated with that mosque or that Islamic center. So this is something we, particularly the Muslims, need to work on, is to literally grab their imams and grab the committees by the scruff of the neck and say, this silence and this impotence that you have is destroying our community. You people are supposed to be upholding our rights. You're supposed to be fighting for them, not covering them up and hiding under every time we hear that there's some sort of issue taking place that has you running for cover. So we require this greatly. And in relation to the repeal of the law, I don't know whether that's going to happen. Certainly, I believe that there were some changes in stop and search that had happened because of the numbers of complaints that they received eventually. So I think this is a long-term process. It began, don't forget, not after September 11th. This began before September 11th, the 2000 Terrorism Act. So it's been in effect for 13 years. And we, as a united community, all the communities that have been affected by this, have been slow to respond. It's taken 13 years for us to come to this point. And the only reason why we're here is because so many people have been affected by it. But we didn't stand with those individuals who said in the beginning, I've been affected by this, this is destroying my life. We left them alone. We said, it's got nothing to do with me. But now everybody's affected by it, so we're finally standing up.
I just wanted to add to that, and I think that I think you're right. I think we have been, there's been a slowness to respond to Schedule 7. I think some of the things that are happening, so the legal case that was described earlier on, that that has the potential to significantly challenge it. Stopwatch and CagePrisoners are asking for a review of Schedule 7. And I think it's, I think we are heading in a more positive place now than ever before. The fact that this event is happening and that Stopwatch are lobbying on it. We've got, the pressure to get the freedom of information inquiry, which identified the absolutely massive extent of the inequalities, and that was only a couple of years ago. So we are on the start of perhaps a long road, but I think it does feel more positive. I think one of the reasons perhaps we've seen more perhaps more activism in the black community is that perhaps the knowledge of the impact and the evidence has been spoken about a bit more. If you look at Section 60, we know Section 44 got repealed, but Section 60, which was introduced to address football hooliganism, if you're black, you're 37 times more likely to be stopped under Section 60. If you're Asian, you're 10 times more likely. Stop and account. The police officer just wants to have a chat with you, find out what you're doing in that area. It's not a search, and they don't really understand why actually people are saying, I don't want you to stop and talk to me. I just want to get about my business. I don't want to ignore you. Black people are 2.7 times more likely, and Asian are 1.4 times more likely. Still a disproportionate, and I think the other thing we need to do is get that information and that evidence out there, because I think a lot of people don't realise the extent of the disproportionality in the widest use of policing powers. And that's what we're talking about institutions like the police and like border agencies that have significant powers, and we need to come together to challenge it. I agree with you about equality. The equality forms alienate. We were talking before I spoke tonight, I was talking with Zin, who's done a lot of research on this, about what does other mean? And are we masking the disproportionality and the inequality by having these categories? And I think that's something that we really need to think about.
I think I want to address the first question the gentleman put, saying that call the government stupid. I think the contrary thing is the government is politically extremely clever because the aim is to divide the communities. The aim is to intimidate them, use those instruments. So please don't underestimate the British state. I call this a state because whether it's Tories or Labour Party, they represent the British state, their governments, but the state remains the same. Can I just tell you that the rot doesn't begin with the British government only, because just after 9/11, the United Nations Security Council rushed through a legislation requiring every country in the world to pass counterterrorism legislation. So every country in the world rushed to pass counterterrorism legislation. And given there was no agreed definition of terrorism, the world governments cannot agree any definition of terrorism. So every country interpreted terrorism the way they wanted to. Some people consider homosexuals as terrorists as well, by the way, in some parts of the world. It's under terrorism legislation. Any dissidents who are against the political system, fighting against repression, have been defined terrorists. So to be pessimistic side, as far as the British politics goes, there are 6 terrorism laws. There's not the slightest hope of us repealing that. We've argued that. We've said they're not necessary. CAMPACC's position is that the criminal law is enough to be able to catch terrorists and prosecute them. But the terrorism has become a legal category, and it's such a powerful, as I explained to you in my speech, there's a lot of political capital behind it. The other thing I must say, to end with this, and the audience should really reflect on this, you will not find anywhere in the British press, very rarely, a discussion on the roots and causes of terrorism. If terrorism happens, why? Why are people turning suicide bombers, for example? Why do people turn to terrorism? And by the way, suicide bombers was not Muslim speciality. Tamils were the first suicide bombers when you look at it, went on, you know. And history people, there were many cases of suicide bombing. And the point is that if a Palestinian girl, for example, whose father has been killed, you know, says to herself, there's no meaning in my life, now I'm going to turn into a suicide bomber. Who can blame her after? I'm not justifying it. I'm saying that it's a result of these policies that we get around to doing. So there's no discussion on it. And I must end by saying that you will not get a discussion in the fact that, you know, terrorist organizations, so-called, are killing people. But the greatest killer of people is state terrorism, state violence. If you look at the violence by states, including the British state throughout history, of the Israeli state, the American violence, they've killed thousands of people in the name of war against terror, honestly. But they're saying that this is legitimate, this is all right. Except that when people resist, that's terrorism. So I think that there is a political argument on what side you come on. But nonetheless, we have to, you know, as I said, fight for those principles. We have to organize the communities as well. You know, I think that's extremely important. It's a difficult task, but it's a very, very important task to undertake.
Thank you. And Shiplu, to answer your question, yes, you have to tell the truth, but don't suffer from verbal diarrhea like me. Make them work for it. Okay. Right. I'm going to take one last batch before we close. You guys made me start 15 minutes late, so I'm going to make you suffer by staying 5 minutes late now. Yes, this brother here, gentleman over there, and we'll take a third back there. Thank you.
I just wanted to ask about the status of the repeal laws.
You have to, sorry, hold it right way.
To give a personal experience, I was stopped in an airport when I wasn't actually travelling, but I think I was on the schedule 44, not schedule 7, and I was asked similar questions, such as which one's got there, whether I know Arabic, and so forth as well. So I was wondering about what other laws are.
Sure thing. Sorry. Can we pass the, if you don't mind, passing the microphone back? Thank you.
Hi, hello. I work for a police and crime commissioner. You would try to be in Suffolk jail. I work for the West Midlands Police and Crime Commissioner. Birmingham International Airport has regular flights to Pakistan, and therefore the issue of Schedule 7 comes up regularly with meetings the commissioner has with his constituent. And also the converse issue, the police, the West Midlands Police, regularly discuss with the commissioner their use of Schedule 7 powers and the activity they undertake to, as they would put it, to prevent violent extremism. So the point that Matthew raised about the reasonableness of having powers that exist at airports that relate to international travel, what are we aiming for here? Are we aiming for there to be no passports? Are we aiming for there to be anybody who can travel to any country without any involvement of the state whatsoever? Where are we aiming for in terms of our objectives that are coming out of the discussion that we're having this evening? Is it the power that's the problem, or is it the way it's being used that's the problem? Arguably, Section 44 has been mentioned, and one could definitely argue that the way the power was used was what led to its downfall, what led to its collapse in court, because it was being used blanketly by, on a blanket basis, both by the Metropolitan Police and by the British Transport Police, stopping hundreds of thousands of people a year in those two cases. And now we're getting to a situation where you've got tens of thousands of people being stopped using Schedule 7 powers, when arguably a power that allows the security services in the broadest sense to be able to interview people when they are travelling internationally could be argued as a reasonable one. That there's not necessarily to have also there might be circumstances in which it is not possible for all sorts of reasons to be able to say why the stop is taking place.
Thank you.
So what are we aiming for? What's the target?
No, I appreciate the question. If we can just get the last gentleman at the back there, please, and then we'll hopefully have a round of answers. Just there. Yeah, thank you.
I just wanted to find out, in terms of the inconveniences that you face at the airport when you're traveling sometimes, as in the case of myself, when I tried to go to Umrah in Ramadan, I was stopped in the airport and I was detained for about maybe 2 to 3 hours just being questioned. He told me that I could fly tomorrow, maybe miss my flight by about 20 minutes, and they said tomorrow we can book another flight and they'll cover the costs. When I came back the next day, they made me pay an extra £700 so I can actually leave. So am I allowed to, who pays for these actually kind of inconveniences, and are they actually allowed to stop you from flying if they're not, suspending you or anything, or if they're not arresting you?
Thank you for the question. Sorry to hear about your situation. Sorry. Do you want to just go in the same order again?
Just want to make a point about this, about the gentleman from the who discussed this. What are we asking for? We have to try to remember that there was a time that existed when these laws weren't necessary, even though Britain was the subject of terrorism, from Irish Republican terrorism, or however they want to describe it. So it's not like we're in a new phase. In fact, if you look at the numbers of people killed in the United Kingdom by that conflict, or during that conflict, it completely overshadows the number of the people, mercifully, that have been killed here. So 3,000 people were killed in that conflict, 53, if we include Woolwich, here in this country. Yet the numbers of laws and the ability to stop people at the airports, and particularly Schedule 7, didn't exist in that way. Certainly the law was passed in 2000. The Omar bombing took place in 1998, in which 28 people were killed. So where's the parity? I was stopped, by the way, and I certainly know that if they want to, they can stop you anyway. I was stopped in 1999 and questioned by MI5. I didn't know what my rights were at that time, but it's not as if it wasn't happening. And it was at Birmingham. And I often travel from Birmingham. And Birmingham's one of the places where, sadly, I have to say, because I was born and raised in Birmingham, it's one of those places where I say, well, actually, I'm going to go to Heathrow, or to Luton, or elsewhere, because Birmingham, even it is the place where I was born and raised, is not welcoming. And Birmingham is also the place where I've, on occasions, twice at least, said, I refuse to answer your questions. And I wasn't arrested. But, so what we're asking for, clearly, is for people to understand, and for the powers to understand, that there was a time prior to the 2000 Act when this wasn't necessary, even though terrorism was a reality in the United Kingdom. So is it repeal? Is it reform? Certainly at this point now, we're asking for a review. We're certainly asking for that, because the numbers, the sheer weight of the numbers of the people that are being stopped cannot justify the amounts of stops that are taking place, or the tangible results, which, as you said, haven't been published. But we can clearly see that it is affecting the community in a very adverse way.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think people are just, the message I get is that people are just asked to be being treated equally and fairly when they choose to travel. And that absolute right to travel, that's my interpretation of what people are asking. And there was an EHRC report into the impact of counter-terrorism measures on Muslim communities. And, you know, there were people that recognise the importance of airport safety and security, but they just want this power to be used fairly and even-handedly and not to be used in a discriminatory way, which it clearly is at the moment. In times of austerity, I mean, if you look at the statistics, it is absolutely a very inefficient way of police, and, you know, if you want to take the discrimination out of it, it's a really inefficient way of using the power. And the other costs, the cost to communities, trust and confidence. You know, communities talk about being over-policed across the piece, whether they're in the country or trying to fly out of it or come into it, and under-protected. And that's a big issue that we have to take, and it's a direct result of the wider use of stop and search. So I think it's about fairness. I would say your experience in the airport, it may have been Section 44, it depends when it was, that's no longer okay, but in anywhere other than travelling, there are other powers that the police can use. So they can generally use stop and search, or stop an account. So if they just had a conversation with you, they are legally able to do that. I'm not sure about the gentleman who ended up having to pay extra. I would think that perhaps through a complaints procedure you could insist on compensation, but somebody else might know more about that than I do.
So I think you raised an issue about questions being asked to you. And several other people said that. Well, I think if you look at what's happened since the year 2000, is that we have a new something which we call crimes of association, which really means that if the counterterrorism police know that you went to a particular mosque, like Finsbury Park, okay, and Abu Hamza was preaching, there, any other radical preacher was there, yeah, they will target you because it's crime by association. If you had a friendship with somebody else like that, or traveling with someone, they will also target you. So the purpose of many of these questions are the presumed, purposes of this particular law that you can read in literature are several. One of them is to secure evidence which assists in the conviction of terrorists. The other is intelligence about terrorist threats. The third one is to disrupt and deter people from being terrorists. The other one is recruiting informants. Now, we haven't mentioned that, but you know it's now admitted freely after the Woolwich incident that one of the culprits, actually, they had asked him to become an informant as well. And then people have admitted that, in fact, that's quite common. And people get harassed about that as well. And the issue there is that the other purpose also is to discipline the community, to intimidate, honestly, to put fear in your hearts, genuinely, because this is about politics of fear. And believe me, you know, that's going on all the time. I must sort of correct Moazzam in a small way, because before the Terrorism Act 2000, which became permanent, there were emergency legislations since 1970s. These powers of ports of entry came into place in 1974. And they've been, this is from a judge, actually, by the way, so I'm quoting a reliable source. So it's a long-standing power. We have had 4 decades of this going on. An issue for us is that many of these powers become normalized. So normalized that nobody, in fact, challenges them. Nobody actually says why. Can I also say that the broader powers, like banning organizations, rights for association, no human rights organization in this country are taking those powers up. Because the powers they've taken up is Section 44, stop and search. But many of these powers, like Schedule 7, for example, powers, for the last 40 years, has not been on the agenda, as far as I understand, of a public campaign. I mean, this is building up now. But this power has been existing for a long time. So I think you need to grasp the kind of complexity of the terrorism legislation. Every part of it influences another part of it. You know, so I think, you know, I mean, coming to the power, I have a problem with the power, I have the problem the way it's used. For example, in terms of legal advice, currently, I arrive from Pakistan. I'm stopped. I want legal advice. Okay? But I've got to pay for it. And that assumes that I have the resources to pay for it. That assumes that I have not the money, but I have the context to pay for it. Now, for me, that's profound injustice. I'm most vulnerable when I arrive. And I'm supposed to do that. I'm supposed to pay for it. And there are demands we can make that, in fact, the new review has turned down, which every interview that the examination officer conducts should be recorded. And those recordings should be monitored. Because how are we to know what you say to you? Now, they don't want them to be recorded, because if it's recorded, there's evidence. Okay? And I don't trust the statistics, you know, because they give us, frankly, I'm very suspicious, but books can be cooked. It's a law among bureaucrats, you can cook the books. You know? I think there's definite profiling based on race, on religion, on national liberation movements. There's definite profiling, definite targeting. Why are we saying it's not happening? Look, there are powerful computers. Yeah? Your name turns up. Somebody's called something Muhammad. Your name turns up. They've got powerful data in the United States with thousands of people on the data list. And that circulates across the world. So any immigration officer can put a pin of button and up comes up your name. So imagine this power we have of internet, etc., is also a power that the state can use for surveillance. That power is in the hands. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much to our entire panel and to Asif and Omar especially for sharing their stories with us. This government and the previous government talks a lot about social cohesion, but it cuts both ways. If you want us to be cohesive, give us a chance. Because every single time they stop somebody at a port, it only reminds those who are stopped that they don't belong, that there is another rule, that there is another entire justice system that exists. And this is what Schedule 7 Stories is about. It's about us reminding this government, it's about us reminding the public that actually we do have a voice, that we do exist, that we are not invisible, and that we will make our place in this society. You want us to be cohesive? This is us being cohesive, by reminding you that we are here, that we exist, and that we will not allow these abuses to go without response, without reply. And I hope that is the message that goes from this event today. So please, all, do check out www.schedule7stories.com and try and help us, assist us in being able to build this website, build this information. The booth is at the back. As Joseph mentioned earlier, please do come to him and hopefully we can start this process. Thank you very much to all our guests, to our panel again, and hopefully we hope to see you again soon. Take care. Goodbye.